Ex-developers of games, what is a secret people should know about? Actual secret tip. Most games secretly reduce the aggressiveness of enemies outside of the view frustum to reduce player frustration of being sucker punched by non-visible enemies. Looking away can sometimes help if you need time to look through radial menus etc. During combat. The original Crisis had a feature where enemies started whiffing if you were very low on health, so it gave you one last fighting chance to recover while still having the illusion of pressure. Probably a bunch of games do this, I'd imagine. Everything is a secret loading screen. Yup. That safety warning at the beginning of Wii games. Mandatory requirement for Wii games, but the game is already loading while that's being displayed. Hardest task for an AI engineer on any game with AI enemies holding guns. Getting those enemies to miss their shot in the first place. Ugh. This AI is stupid. They all charge in at the front and let me mow them down. Ugh, this AI cheats. They magically teleport behind me and start shooting me when I have no cover because I'm engaged up front. Creating fun but tough but fair and smart but not too smart of AI seems ridiculously hard. Having dabbled in some independent game development myself, AI is truly the bane of my existence. It's not difficult to make an entity perform an action. Making an entity perform that action as well or as poorly as the difficulty or game design prescribes. However, technically, anything that requires a degree of imprecision can be accomplished by simply throwing in a bunch of randomly generated values into your equations. But there's an easy kludge way and a right way. And I heavily suspect letting your important game mechanics devolve into kludge spaghetti is probably not an ideal path to take. The QC department usually gets thrown under the bus by players, but almost all of them have no idea the amount of work these guys put in. It's crazy to me that QC isn't considered a crucial part of development by regular users. Deadlines are a really complicated affair. Especially when talking about AAA games launched on consoles, not just PC. The patches need to be sent to Sony or Microsoft for testing, and as you can imagine, losing your slot because of delays fucks everything up. To be fair, quality control departments are a joke in most AAA studios. Not because of the people working in quality control. Those guys are usually hard workers that do the best jobs possible. But with the current mentality of ship it now, fix it later in the AAA industry, quality control has been dealt a hand that gets rougher every year. Not only do they have to work insanely long hours, pretty common to see quality controls guys work 100 hours a week. They are massively underpaid, treated like garbage by a lot of people in the industry, and fired the second they are not needed. But hey, that's just business as usual in the AAA industry. Crunch, coercion, harassment, and a lot of other nasty stuff is just considered normal nowadays. At least for the higher ups. Backend is a spaghetti code. Only God knows how it works. Every time we fix something, we FCK something up in return. Fascinated by this even when I'm building a website, lol. Couldn't imagine being a game developer. Organization in logic, flow and structured discipline and defining variables is key. Almost everyone who worked on the game you love doesn't work at the company anymore, as they worked 9 hours for a few years and then got fired as soon as the game was out to reduce expenses. Everyone in video games is paid like shitty except upper-est management. You'd think you could have more semi-pro indie games where a team forms itself, makes the game, and shares equally across the board. Except of course I guess everyone wants to cash in when they do it themselves, so they do the same thing. A game developer said this on TikTok. When you first start a game like COD, they throw AI bots in the online matches because it can be hard playing against real people when you first start. Activision Blizzard have actually patented the reverse idea. They put new players into online games with experienced players who have bought microtransaction items such as weapon skins. The idea being the new player gets their ass kicked and relates some of that towards the MTX weapons and so is more inclined to purchase them. Most are overworked and underpaid. It's the law of supply and demand. Tons of young people's dream job is to work in the gaming industry. And as a result, They can pay people really crappy wages and still have a lot of decent candidates. I had a friend who worked for Sony in their gaming department. Their pay was so crappy. About 5 of them needed to share a single apartment. Codes never dysfunction. It's how you wrote it that's the problem. I have had too many arguments in my life where people say it's not a bug. It's just being coded wrong. Double quote. And they never seem to understand. Bugs don't just appear from the ether. It's either an interaction that wasn't accounted for, or just an oversight. Everybody is depressed in the industry. My brother had an opportunity to get into the industry at the beginning and didn't. Went into academia instead. He predicted this would be the case. Can you explain to me why there is so much depression? It's basically as competitive and predatory as the porn industry. If you complain about your job, there is probably an 18-year-old willing to do it cheaper. Current game dev student. Ick now when characters put an object behind their back and it vanishes. As if to put it in an infinitely large pocket. It isn't always cleared from memory. Sometimes these characters are quite literally storing the item in their ass. Sometimes when a video game is terrible, it's not because the team who worked on it have no skills. Often it's because the company wants sales. So they set the release date too soon and don't give the developers enough time to create a well-made game. People want to know why a game is delayed. I was writing code for a now cancelled project. The one cutscenes that took 1 minute of in-game time took 6 hours of work. If a bug happens, it takes even longer. When you turn your hobby game development into a job, it becomes just another job. I found myself playing less games in my spare time as a result, which then negatively impacted my excitement for the game dev job. Making game dev a hobby activity again brought back all the fun. And my job is not related to gaming. It's not a bug. It's a feature. Sometimes even things that are detriments are bonus features. While bonus EXP was originally normal EXP with a penalty after playing X hours X amount of EXP earned. They changed the penalty to normal and the normal to bonus and everyone got super happy. Psychologists take a major part in app development to make it addicting. Why do you think Fortnite, PUBG, etc. are so addictive? A psychologist has helped in the development of the app. 100%. When kids are made fun of at school for not paying for stuff in a freemium game, you know you struck it rich. There was a neat GDC conference that explained money in mobile games opening with checking your morals at the door before starting. The politics and nepotism of the game industry might make you not want to be a game designer anymore. Will never forget the day the person who gave me my rec told me which asses I need to kiss to ensure a contract renewal. Glad I didn't cause game got cancelled anyway. Don't know how qualified I am. First of all, I'm a tiny indie developer. Second, I still make games. Anyways, for the question. Please don't make your text like any sprite. It's more effective just to make flexible code for text. Drawing each dialog box without code is a real pain. I admit. Until recently I did this. If you are playing a Chinese mobile game, or using any Chinese app, is built by people working on 996. It's worse hell than the current Western crunch. They are expected to respond to phone notifications even while sleeping. They often work a minimum of 9 hours a day, not including breaks and travel, and usually have to work an additional 6 on weekends. I really advocate for boycotting all applications as they are built by people who are being abused. When you see someone in a multiplayer game, you're not actually seeing them. Sending all of the data about their game to your game would be impossible for most internet connections, let alone doing it for more than a 1v1. Instead, what a game does is it sends you just their action data, such as where they spawned, who they are playing as, and when and where they move, shoot, or use a skill. And then your game creates a bot that looks like them that imitates the actions they take. It's why people can appear to be behind walls for you while on their screen they can see and shoot you. Small differences in position of where a bot is spawned in your game and their game mean your relative positions are inexact. And the game is coded to resolve these discrepancies. Very briefly, I worked in the industry. For Ubisoft nonetheless. No actual complaints about them. But you will not make jack shit as a developer. Go do anything else you can with your degree. You will make more and work less. Not a dev, but went to school for game production for about a year and was a game tester for D3 Productions for about 2 years. Don't test a game you like. Not as a beta tester. I mean a full-time job. I tested several games on the PC and a couple on Nintendo DS. I used to like games like Tetris and Breakout, but now they are super repetitive to me now. At school, we game a simple game for the school to play and review, and it was then that I realized that some gamers will complain about the littlest things, so if anyone ever decides to go into game production, keep in mind that you can't make everyone happy. I recommend making games for older consoles. Like ROM hacks. The Sega Saturn had a home dev kit. You can probably find it online. The Saturn's games were coded in B, A, S, I, C, and they are good, beginner-friendly coding software. Not an ex-developer. Gave up hope on getting into it a long time ago. Overworked. Underpaid. Mentally strained developers who try their hardest while the execs fire them randomly and deny any bonuses while taking in millions from a product they never directly had their hand in making. Video games also totally need microtransactions because despite executives being paid more than the studio's actual budget, it's just too expensive to make games without obscene markets obviously. If you fix a bug, you make 2 more. If it takes 1 developer to solve a problem in 1 hour, it takes 3 developers 1 hour to solve the same problem. If you can't see it, it isn't loaded. Game developers have lots of smart tricks to make performance good while having the illusion of everything already being loaded. It's not a developer's fault if your high-end gaming machine from a few years ago cannot run at full detail settings. It takes a long time to fix anything. People will complain if you do something, and people will complain if you do the opposite. Games are designed to be addicting, and they hire scientists to achieve that. Pays like crap. Devs are always depressed. We had a PC, 360, and PS3 massively multiplayer real-time shooter working cross-platform in our office in 2012. It was so seamless that it didn't matter which system we had on our desk for the company-wide playtests. The higher-ups tried desperately to make this a feature that shipped, but the console wars were too hostile in those days, so it didn't happen. If you're working with a small team and the lead is set on producing one specific title, that's fine. If however they continue to talk in circles without forward momentum, for example rewriting the initial opening sequence 20 times instead of moving on and completing the plot, only having vague descriptions for the art team and becoming irrationally upset when it take a couple weeks to go from concept to 3D model. I signed a NDA in regards to one particular monster type, so I have to step lightly around what I say, but that monster was the main one you'd be fighting. It had neat abilities, but that was it. I guarantee you've fought and killed this monster many times. People are dumb. Someone please give me a reason that I should still pursue a career in game design. I already knew about some of the shitty politics with these companies, but this thread is making it sound way worse than I previously thought. Nothing is magical. Everything pretty that you see on screen is multiple shitty parts glued together to make it seem like a perfect thing. The code written never gets reviewed on most cases. All we care about is the result. If it works, it's fine. The code might be reviewed if the performance target is not met by large margin. The game should run at 30 FPS, but is constantly dips to 25 FPS. Try removing X or replacing Y with P. If it works, fine. If it doesn't, FCK it. We don't have money and time to fix that shit. Hundreds of bugs. Known bugs. Bug that might take a minute to fix and all those are stacked in issues list and anyone barely looks into it. Those are only fixed and looked up if senior QA or management brings it up. Or, if there are multiple complaints from user themselves. I worked in games for 8 years. And the average rate of retention is 7 years. The best managers I worked for were non-games types who wanted everything done professionally, had qualifications and had validated structure to rely on. The biggest assholes I worked for were creative leaders who have only worked in games and their teams were vehicles for personal glory. The best co-workers I had were career professionals in their disciplines, sometimes with cross-industry experiences. The secret is that after your first or second title, you realize that whilst it's a great adventure, you can find significantly better pay and conditions working in other industries. Games are great, just not career great or build a family great. People working at AAA game companies often are horribly overworked, fall into depression, cut contact with their friends and keep drinking themselves to sleep. Before you downvote me to shitty, just know I have living, barely breathing examples in my closest friend circle. Games dynamically lower difficulty, otherwise players will get frustrated and leave. You are not as good as you think you are. Most do not. That would require a lot of programming bug fixing that no one wants to waste time resources on. Most games are repetitive, not random, so you can learn. Edit. In fact, in most shooting games it is the opposite. They want you to know where the enemies are but don't want you to get headshot on immediately walking around the corner. So they start off shooting worse, then get better. Maybe not a secret, but just because a developer agrees with you and likes your input doesn't mean he or she can implement it. Higher ups make those calls, so there's no point in lashing out at the people who have no control over such things. It's kind of like yelling at a retail employee because something isn't on sale.